Hello and welcome to Creator Toolbox on today, July 6th. This is the show where we teach you how to use the tools that you need to build apps on the ServiceNow platform. We're excited to be here today, our first show in a couple of weeks. And before we get started, we're going to do some intros. Chuck.
Hey, my name is Chuck Tomasi, Senior Developer Advocate at ServiceNow. Been here since 2010, customer for a couple of years before that, specializing in custom applications, integrations, and all kinds of stuff on the platform that I just find fun.
All right, Daniel.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Daniel Draes. I'm a Senior Outbound Product Manager at ServiceNow for Creator Workflows. So I help defining and building all the features that Chuck's using in his awesome experiences. Today I'll be showing you some pieces around ATF.
All right, my name is Brad Tilton. I'm a Senior Developer Advocate with a Developer Program here at ServiceNow. I've been developing on the platform for about, I don't know, it's going to be 13 years soon here. But I've done lots of different parts of the platform, kind of specializing in custom apps and front-end things. But I'm excited about today's show, where we're going to be diving into the automated test framework and creating some custom steps. So with that, I will turn it over to Daniel. Do you want to share with us what it is we're going to be doing today, and then we can start a screen share?
All right, thank you, Brad. So yeah, automated test framework is probably, you guys at least know for sure, is our take on automating tests of applications, right? To make upgrades easier, simpler, faster, more resilient, and these kind of things. And with the discussions we have with customers, and we see that there are certain areas and pieces that are not as heavily used as we would think they should be. And one of them is test step configurations that we will look into today. So I'll be showing two examples of how this can be used, where they make sense, and then maybe we have a discussion around that, what else we could do with that feature.
Daniel, can you give us a quick overview for those that are new? What is ATF? What does it stand for? What do we use it for? That kind of thing.
Sure, absolutely, Chuck. So ATF stands for Automated Test Framework. And it's basically our take on testing applications. So customers might have other tools around there like Selenium and stuff where you automate UI testing and remote control an application. Basically, you see how it reacts. And ATF is our take on testing ServiceNow on ServiceNow. It's a no-code, low-code environment. Yes, you can also code. There's also a pro-code piece, and we will see bits and pieces of that today as we build configurations, right? That's the pro-code piece. But intentionally, it's a low-code environment where you create tests that you can reuse and rerun as often as you like.
Excellent. And you can bundle these tests into suites. So literally, you could push one button, walk away, come back, and find this. This is very, very helpful for not only putting your applications into production, and there's some APIs to help automate that, as we saw in Tech Now last week. If you didn't catch that, Charn Lin joined us to talk a little bit about automating that deployment process, but also for upgrades. Very helpful. We get a lot of feedback from customers that, my gosh, my upgrades take longer every release. This is a way to definitely shorten that life cycle.
Absolutely, good point there, Chuck. We just had a session last week in the ITBM Toolbox to showcase how to use ATF, and that's also another video that's out there on YouTube. I guess you'll put in the link somewhere down below, I don't know, to reference these videos. It's kind of why do we use it, what do you do there. It's talking a bit about the quick start tests and some of the best practice that we have out there. As we talk about other videos, we will start a platform academy next week, actually, where we'll talk about more platform features on a bi-weekly schedule. First week will be Quebec release, but then the week thereafter or 2 weeks thereafter, we will start digging into ATF again, as this is really kind of a topic we receive a lot of questions.
In that platform academy, that's going to be something that people can log into and ask questions live?
Absolutely. It's
awesome.
An YouTube session with people logging in, asking questions. We'll have like 15-20 minutes content like we have today. We pick up a topic, we explain that, drill into it, and then we open up the forum for questions and Q&A. Yeah. And all these videos will be recorded and we'll put out on the community so you can rehearse them and listen to them at your own leisure.
Looking
Awesome.
forward to it. That's good stuff. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and we'll definitely have a link to the series, the Platform App Academy series, under this video when we publish it. All right, so do you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we can get into what we're doing today? And then we have some feedback that your mic is a little low, Daniel. I don't know if that's something you can turn up easily, or maybe just get a little bit closer. If not,
oh yeah, that Zoom put my microphone lower, so that should get better now.
There we go.
That's classic Zoom auto adjust your microphone level.
That's right.
Thanks for pointing that out.
And your internet connection may be unstable.
I hope not.
I'm gonna get a T-shirt that says that. That's gonna be like one of the COVID T-shirts.
All right, so for today's demo, what you see here is a brand new developer instance that like everybody can get on developer.servicenow.com. Brand new, just started off this morning, and I prepared some little things like a good chef cook would do. And when the demo, right, you have some stuff pre-cooked. I have that here, so let's have a look of what I have and what we want to do today. So
pretty, the homepage.
Lovely,
Yeah,
right?
nice.
And we love the new homepage advocating our new App Engine Studio, which will be another feature on our Platform Academy, App Engine Studio.
You need to
So
ring a bell every time you mention that.
as long as I don't need to put like $5 into some kind of a savings bank, that's all good.
Like a swear jar?
Kind of, right? So what did I create to use ATF on today? Right, so I have a scoped application. It's actually a spoke, a Google geocoding spoke. As you might know, spokes are our integration points to third-party systems. And this one is basically just using Google's geocoding feature to transform a physical address into longitude and latitude that we can use to map out information on a map. I created that a while ago, put it out in the community, and I thought it might be a good idea to create an ATF suite around that as we ship that feature, right? So we want to test this feature. To show you how that works, what it is, so let's, you see there's a flow in there, there's an action and some credentials, that's it. Let's open that action. Oh, I'll need to add that to the share as it comes up in a new window. That's this one. Make that flow bigger. As this flow, this action opens up, it's a very simple one, right? It just is a REST API call that I'm doing. And transforming that information. Google is quite open and free to use, as if you don't use it too often and too frequently, they don't even charge for it, which is great for demo purposes. So we see here, there's a flow designer action, which has an input as an address. If you look to the output, it gives us longitude, latitudes, and a status. Did it work? Yes or no? That's kind of the bottom line, right? In between, we have script and REST step. We don't need to worry about that today. That would be more an integration session. But that's the action that I've created and that we want to test. Now, a traditional, as you develop, you would probably click that test button and put here an address like one of our offices in Zurich. Just type that. That would be an address of one of our offices. You put that in like that. You run the test. It talks to Google, and you get your information back. Did it work? Yes or no? That's great, but now we want to automate that piece and have that as a part of a test suite. Now that should complete it, and yeah, there we go. We get a result. We look into our result, and we get back some coordinates, like an OK message. That's great. So we know it's working, but how to get that into an ATF setup? So we don't.
Does it tell you if that is east or west?
I probably does. I just picked out these two attributes out of the response body. If we probably into the steps, there's a whole bunch of more information that comes back, right? You get a big JSON array here with stuff. So maybe
Sure.
Somewhere.
We're gonna have to tweak that object a little bit.
Yeah, you see, there's probably I just put in. Yeah, it says north, southwest, so you get the information somewhere. Maybe you want to improve that spoke. Right.
Give us the GitHub repo. We'll fork a copy.
Yeah, you can. It's out on GitHub, absolutely. But I think it's a private one, as we tend to have private repos these days, right? But I'll give you that for sure. So yeah, that's what I want to build my test case around, right? So what do we need? We need addresses to supply to that, and we need a call to that spoke endpoint. I'll close that window and go back to my instance. If we go for ATF in the navigator, you can see there's the automated test framework. It scrolls too fast with all the tests and suites and stuff. So how would we go forward? We go into tests. Let's create a new test. Let's say we want to test our geocoding by Google, something like that. Save that. And that's probably a point where most of the customers would understand, like, oh, how do I test actually in action? How can I do that? How can I test a REST integration? We don't have any tests as such, right? If you go to add test steps, these are all the different steps that we can do. Yes, you could do a REST here and send the REST, but it would not test our action. It would just test the REST call. So you kind of independent testing that, but we don't have a feature to actually test our action, right? If we go here in action, yes, we have UI actions and list actions, but not the flow designer action, integration actions that we need. That's not there. So that's kind of the part that we want to add as a feature in here. So let's start by that. And then we go, the way we do that is, if you scroll down on your ATF to administration, you can see step configurations. This is kind of the back-end version of what you've just seen in the dialog. All the steps that are out there, these are the configurations. You can see the same things: click UI action, record insert, add items, shopping cart. All of them are here. Some of them are Java code, so you can't really see what they do. Some of them are JavaScript code that can be used and reused, like record query, even if it's called deprecated. It is actually JavaScript code in here that you can look at. If it loads, we'll see some script.
So, Daniel, I see a very close analogy to this. You went out and created a custom action in Flow Designer to do something specific that wasn't available out of the box.
Correct.
And you're building a custom test step for ATF.
Absolutely.
For something that wasn't available out of the box. And these are the basic building blocks that you would use to, in Flow Designer, you would automate your flow. In ATF, you're going to give enhanced capabilities to automate your test.
Right. Absolutely, Chuck. Yeah, it's kind of the same pattern that applies here. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you can see here some example code, right? Execution code and description code, and I'll dig into that as I create one now. But there are examples in there for you to look at if you want to create your own. So for now, yes, we know we need our own one. So let's create a new test step configuration. We'll need to give it a name, obviously. And you see my browser knows already that I did that before. So I'll say geocoding by Google. We can say if that step needs to be run on the server, or does it need to be actually run on the client side or REST side. So we can say where that step runs. And this time it's a server script. That's fine. That's what we want. We can put it into a category, which is kind of the structure view that we have seen in as we add a test step. I just put it into the server category. We give it an order. You can put in a template reminder. A template helps you to say if you need certain inputs and outputs and properties to set for that. In that case, I don't really need them, but I need to put in a value here. Just put in template. A description, testing Google geocode action in Flow Designer. Let's put it like that. And then we get to the heart of it, which is our description and the step execution script, the two scripts. So what do they do? The first one is actually generating a description as we add this step into a test suite, right? So if we have parameters to that test, and we will have, like the address, we can use these parameters to generate a description. So the description doesn't read like, I'm testing geocoding, I'm testing geocoding for address X, Y, and Z, or for whatever you want to use. So you can dynamically generate a description. As for the simplicity here, we can just say geocoding action test, and we could enhance that later if we want.
You have access to any objects in there? I mean, is current to represent something, or?
You have access to a variable called step, and step would also have access to all the inputs and outputs of the current test step as you add it. So as soon as
the test step, not the test record itself.
That's correct. It's the step as you add it to a test suite.
Got it.
And we can use as soon as I add input variables, we can reuse these input variables here. For now, I have no inputs yet, so we need to wait for that. As for the execution, you can see there is a large boilerplate in here, right? A lot of comments of how to use it, and that might maybe freak some people out. Oh my God, that seems complicated, but it's actually quite simple. It's just giving you some examples of what you can do. Like, for example, how to read a write record, how to get to inputs, how to set a failed or a success message, how to report something like an output message. So it gives you some examples as you go through it, what you can use. Don't read it now. We'll go through that as we basically build our test case, right? So let me save that first so we have that stored. Another question is, how do we get to the code that we need to trigger our action? I guess one of you guys knows how to do that, right?
I think we do.
The Flow API.
Exactly. And how do we get the template of our code that we need?
Are you testing the action specifically, or you want to test the flow?
I want to test the action.
Okay, open the action.
If I can
As long as it's published, it's got to be published or you won't get the option on the menu.
Was it just
Uh-oh.
geocode?
Jesus, why can't I find it? Let's go to application, Google. I put it something.
That's what I usually do.
There you go.
Okay, the little kebab menu in the upper right next to the save button. Copy or create code snippet. They changed the verbiage on it.
Absolutely. Create code snippet. Here we go. This one is giving us
For the server. Got to get the server code.
Exactly. It's a server code. It's pretty much all we need, right? It talks about the inputs, the address that we need as an input. You can run it asynchronously or synchronously. For ATF, I would recommend synchronously. We want to get the feedback. We want to know the answer. Picking out the output. So that's pretty much all we need. So we just need to basically copy that code. You can take the full one, but it will take the function start and end it, which we don't need. We just need the body content of that script. Go back here and paste that in. This is pretty much almost all that we need to do. The only thing we need to be now careful is we have an input into my step function, and we have the inputs defined here as going into the action. So we need to differentiate the two of each other to make sure they are different. So I tend to basically just rename this one and say that is Flow Designer input.
I just ran into that problem this past weekend with a different app. Like, oh, why isn't this variable working? Oh, I reused it.
Yeah, so that takes a little sometimes to find these nasty ones, right? So rename these inputs, you get them here, and if you have more inputs, multiple ones, and especially here in that line where it says in foreground with inputs, blah. And the same thing for outputs, right? We get here outputs, so rename these outputs to make sure we really separate them out from the ones that our step configuration uses. There we go.
Good catch. That would have slowed me down.
That's the important part, right? And all we need
That's why people watch these videos. Like, what did I miss? What did I miss?
So now for the first test, we can basically just apply an address as a string here, like we did before, right? So hier starts a 4, Switzerland, and we'll probably get the same question about northeast, southwest, or wherever it was, right?
Well, that's why we make tests, because when somebody like me comes along and says, hey, we need to know southeast, west, etc., you can always go back and test and say, did the test work? Is the test producing the correct results? Mm-hmm. That's why you have tests that go with your changes.
Absolutely. So what this step now is doing is taking the address that we supply here, run our action, and get the results output. It doesn't set any result or failure message yet. The default behavior is we expect it fails, unless we say, yes, it was good. Right? So let's process our result here. As we know, there is a status code, and process if it actually worked or not. So now I know, as I created that spoke action, I know that my status needs to be okay, as without a question mark, to say, yes, it worked. And if that works, then we can basically go back up and say, yeah, it was a success. That way we return to our ATF test saying this step was successfully completed. As a good programmer, we would probably go in and say, if not, we would put in the error message, which would be this one. And that's what boilerplate text here comes in handy, as you can copy and paste the content as you need, right?
Yeah, I would call this a low-code example, because you've done a lot of copying and pasting. Even though there's a lot of script here, you didn't actually write much, Daniel. I'm not impressed with your coding skills.
That's absolutely true, Chuck. And I like low code, right? I am a developer, but I like low code. It makes my error rate slower. So what we can also do is we can put in an output message and maybe say action returned, and just put, hey Jesus, I can't type this evening. Returned. Put in maybe the lat and long. And
I'm going to point something else out for you, Daniel. Is your output message? You're hard coding it in English, but yet I know your native language is not English. This may be an opportunity where people want to look at gs.getMessage.
Absolutely.
You have translatable messages.
Absolutely. You can use that in here, as it's a server-side script. You can definitely do so and translate these messages. If somebody's watching closely, we can see that we have here a Loang, which is actually matching this one here. So I seem to have a typo somewhere else, which is fine. We'll keep it in Loang instead of long. So let's update that. We have our step in there, right? And that's a pretty fixed one, but we have the step configuration. Now let's move back to our ATF test that we started a little earlier. That was again something with Google, I hope. There we go. And add this step to our test, right? We get our test. Now let's add the test step that we just created. There we go. Geocoding by Google. There it is.
Did you have to do anything to publish this or make it available to everybody, or just
automatically
saving
available.
it as?
It's automatically
Okay.
there. You need to save it, you can use it. Right. Currently it has no inputs, no outputs as we defined it, right? It's a pretty dumb step, but it is there. So we can add that to our test. And if I actually run my test, we should see it working and get a message back of success, hopefully, as it did work before within Flow Designer. That looks actually good. It's doing the rollback as we expect. And if we go to the results screen, we can see here our message action return, so we get the numbers back here. So that
Nice.
was pretty easy, right?
Except it's hard coded to that one address, and that doesn't make for a good
That's what we're going to
test.
change next, right? Let's see how we can change that and make it a bit more flexible in terms of what we see here. But yes, absolutely. Let's go back to our test step configuration.
The recent menu. I love that.
There we go. It's still very helpful. We definitely need that one, right? So now we have the test step, and we know it's going with a static input, producing a static output, how to make it dynamic. We have these related lists where we have input and output variable, right? So let's just add an input variable to get our address in. This address is a string. I think that's a simple one, right? We just call it address. Get a column name as usual, make it a little bit bigger. Addresses, I don't know how many lines and text they might have in there. Keep it mandatory, right? Without the address, it doesn't make any sense to call our function here. We have different things like choice list, calculated value. So like you would know from variables or field types, you have pretty much similar options here. But for now, string just is fine. We submit that. Having that input variable.
Yeah, that looks very familiar if you've looked at a dictionary entry for a field or a variable for a catalog item. That should be very friendly territory right there.
Absolutely. So we get the address. Now let's do output variables. Maybe we want to reuse the longitude, latitude, and the status code for further steps within our test. So we can do the same thing with an output. Let's say again, we have a string. Call that status. That's a max length of 10. It's very short. Submit that. I don't bother on monitoring, displaying these kind of things. But yeah, we have an output variable. Add the longitude and latitude. And these are float numbers, as we know, as we've seen. So we have the longitude. We want to put it that way. Submit. And one more, and we'll be almost there. Come on. Another float variable. Yeah,
it almost feels like
two.
There's another parallel between ATF and Flow Designer. You've got inputs, you've got outputs, you've got steps that you're running in a certain pattern. It feels like we could put a Flow Designer kind of GUI on ATF.
Oh, don't ask for that, Chuck. But it is something that we look into, how to upgrade the user experience as you use ATF. That is on the roadmap. It is not something on the short term, unfortunately. We have much higher priorities at this moment. But yes, it is on the roadmap to think about how the user experience as you do ATF tests could be improved. Absolutely. And yeah, Flow Designer kind of interface is definitely one of the good options, I would say. So now we have inputs and outputs. The way we link them up in our code, let's copy that line. Oh, I'm a lazy one. Keep that. Maybe we need it later, right? And remove our static string here. I'll take this off. And that's where our input variables comes in that we get here. Inputs dot, and we can check on our related list. The name of it is called uAddress. Come on, cursor back into field, uAddress. That will give us the address from the input. And we could do the similar things if everything is fine in terms of defining the outputs. If we remember the names of these guys. Let's say our boot status equals status. Outputs longy. Would be nice if we have autocomplete here. Equals 1. Outputs
Oh, Mr. T. There you go. The extra A in long is to prevent you from using a JavaScript keyword. How's that for an excuse? Oh wait, it's the LAT instead of LANG.
Oh yeah.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
That's why we're here.
Latitude, which is probably wrong as well, right? Latitude, but that's the name of my variable down here. Should probably be longitude, right? I'm not a geo.
Another thing you might want to consider in that else, you might also want to consider just returning like zeros or something that we could, get a hold of later, because there's always default values will trip you up, as I've learned many, many, many times, and continue to remind myself, like, why isn't this working? Oh, something failed and I have nothing to work with.
Very good point. Yeah. So now we have wired up inputs and outputs, right? Let's update our step here. Save that. Now let's go back to our test. Let's see what's happening to our test. There we are, our test. If I go back to my test step, we suddenly have an address field. Oh, wonder where that comes from. It's mandatory.
Oh, your inputs.
There you go. So let's put in again our address. If somebody wants to put in another address, we can. That one I know by heart.
You need a macro editor for that thing.
Let's save that. We get in this one. Awesome. Go back to our test. Back to my test. Here we go. And run it again. And it should do.
I would have gone with 2225 Lawson Lane, Santa Clara, California.
I might come back to your address in a minute. Go to result. Everything looks green. That's good. And again, we got our numbers back. So now we have dynamic step configuration, taking this address, passing it through a flow designer action or integration hub action as such, and getting the output back. That way we can test these actions quite easily, automated, reusable, as often as we like.
So then we have these outputs defined. We could use those outputs in the next test step, right?
Absolutely, right? So if I would go to a next test step and maybe add comment action, I think we have to
create a user.
Yeah, let's create a user with that numbers. That doesn't matter. That's fine, right?
First name latitude, last name longitude.
You can use now here our data pill picker. As soon as it starts acting, go to the geocoding and get the variables back. So you could use the status, longitude, latitude, whatever in future steps of your test suite.
Nice.
Absolutely.
No, you may actually, your test may be to create a location, and you need that location's latitude and longitude to do further tests or something of that nature. So this could fit in very, very well.
Absolutely. So
I like it.
If we still have time and want to move on, another thing I add to kind of round that up, what I added is I created a table called Now Offices, and that's where the Lawson Lane might come back to you, Chuck. Where I created just a table of addresses, and I didn't use our location table, as that would split them out into different fields, and I just need for this spoke all in one field, right? But I have here a couple of addresses, and they have no latitude and longitude yet. So we could use these as input into our flows, into our test, basically, and run these tests across all of these entries in here. However, another piece what ATF doesn't support is fetching that value out of this field, right? We can get the whole record by look up a record, but we can't get to that address content of it because we can't do a dot walking. If we go to test, just to show what I'm talking about. again, Google code, if I would add a test step like look up a record, look up record, record query. I can query a record. It's not look up, it's query. I can obviously say I want to go to my now offices, get in there,
All right.
and maybe a condition. Let's say name is not empty. It's not empty. Come on, it's not empty, which is fine. So we just want to have any record from there. That's just great. And maybe move that one down into a coding action behind that to get the sequence different. That didn't work. That's first. Refresh. It did work.
If you look at that record query test, there's an example of a dynamic description for you.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Where you say is validate one record, now office is matching query is not empty. Yep. That's a dynamic description script that you've seen in the test configuration. Absolutely.
I would submit that a more appropriate query would be address is not empty, since that's what we're testing.
But
you write your own test.
I think the field that I chosen is name, right?
Oh, okay.
So if I go to my geocoding step here and I would use the data pill picker, I can get to the first record, but I have only table and document ID. I can't get to the field of that record, which sounds like awkward and easy at first, but it's just not there. And so let's create a test configuration to do what we need. To see how quickly that goes, we go again back.
I say, something tells me you have an answer for this challenge.
As I said, a good chef cook has some stuff prepared, right? So let's say get field.
Not on live coding happy hour.
That's now almost live coding. Field value, getting a field value. Now you can see you can try to type fast. Again, another order. And we need a little bit of a script here, which is something I have a bit of prepared as we're just looking at the time. Let's push that in. You can see, again, low code. We need 3 input variables, one called table, one record, one field name. We do the glide record, get up that field name to the output, and that's it. It's another 5 lines of code or 6 lines of code, and you would be able to get out a value of a record. Save that. And we need to map our inputs and output records, obviously, to get there. So we have input variables. Come on. That is of the type table. Table name, call it table. New table, keep it mandatory, done. Have another one, which we call a record. That is of document ID. As we want to reference a record, right? Call it a record.
Ooh.
For this one, we need, as we save it, to say what is the table field of it. So we need to have that dependent in here, but that only pops up after save. So we have a dependent field, and now that is obviously easy. It's our table, not a lot that we have. That way we link these two fields or variables together, saying first select the table, and the second one is giving the record inside that table. Similar like variables on a service catalog, same concept. Table record, and we need which field we actually need, right? This one could be probably a bit more sophisticated, but for the sake of the demo, I'm just using a string and call that field name, new field name, 40 characters, submit.
Document IDs are really powerful. They're like an extension to reference fields, only you can reference any record on any table when you bind them to that table. They're really, really powerful.
I guess you have a live coding happy hour on that probably 10 years ago or so.
I think I had a community live stream on that in the last couple of years too.
So now we define the output, which would be just field value. Is that the name I had? Yep, that's the field value. Let's make it 200 as that was the field we had. We submit that.
I'm going to hate myself later because now I have to stick in another video reference. Go find it.
So we get all the inputs, we get all the outputs. That should be working. Let's go back to our test and see how we can use that. That's the easier one, right? Test geocoding by Google. So add another test step, which was get field value, I believe. Yeah, a valley. I have a valley. Okay. Close enough. So we see
that's to avoid a secret keyword again.
right.
Now Office is the table we wanted to look at. Let's select the record in that table. That should work. Any preference? Let's take the headquarter for now.
Sure.
And we'll need the field. If you look at our table, I think it was called name, right? Submit.
I hope it's not case sensitive.
Yeah.
Push that up into the first place. We remove our record query, as we said that one doesn't really help us any further. So let's take this off.
Did it auto number the other ones automatically?
It did. It resorted and ordered.
Oh, that's nice.
Not of the other as I moved it around. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's just look at our table to make sure we have the right field. I hate it when tests don't work. It's actually address, the field that we need, not the name.
That's what I thought. It's not u_address, is it?
Good point. Let's have a look. Make sure that we do the right thing, right?
Well, it may be.
It might very well be, as that is just a global table I created. You're right. U_address. Thank you. Saved us 5 minutes of the video.
You were building the test in global, so I had to assume this sample app was built in global also.
Let's go in here and get field value and change our field name to, come on, U_address. Update. And now let's go into our geocoding action and rewire that one. Right? We go back to the first step. We get the field value, we drop it in here, and obviously take the fixed string out and update that. And that should be us getting the field value, passing it to the geocoding, and get an answer. Let's try. Fingers crossed. Any bets if it works?
I have confidence in you.
Thank you. Wow, we get success. So let's look at the result. And we actually get completely different numbers, which is good, right? We know that our headquarters is somewhere different than our address in Zurich.
Oh, we don't need an east-west if it's negative. That'll work.
Oh, see? There we go. Maybe that's why.
Maybe that's why.
So that
I like how dynamic that first test is. You know, we can use it for this use case, or you could use it for any use case where you need a field value. And then I also like that. I think the way that script looked was, were we picking a specific record or was it random?
It was using the input.
It was the input, right?
Oh yeah, you pass an
It had
input.
3 inputs.
Okay.
Yep.
Table, record, field name. It was just in a real simple glide query.
Yeah, I wonder if you would even want to randomize it more so that it picks something, you know, it picks data at random so that your ATF test, you know, tests a little better. That was when I was doing a lot of ATF stuff. It was always like try to make your data as random as possible, because if you're always testing the same record or same set of records, you know, you may be missing some scenario that makes your test fail.
Oh, that never happens, say all developers.
With that step, I think I should say kudos to who kudos own, right? The get field value is actually an idea from one of our brilliant technical consultants out in the field, from Bob Darroch. He sent me that idea of creating that get field value. He used that successfully in customers already. And as I said, it's really dynamic. You can pick any record, any value, you pull it in, and you can use it in your test, right? So you're not reliant on hard coding values or properties or things like that. You can just pick up what you need and make your test way more dynamic.
If it's so useful, we should put it in San Diego.
Probably that'd be a nice idea, right? There's always the idea portal. Put it in and vote it up in the community. We are listening. We are reading them.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's what I wanted to show in terms of step configurations, how to use them, and make your tests more flexible and more powerful.
Very helpful. Getting some good feedback from the chat. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
We got time for some Q&A?
Yeah, we did have a question come in during the chat around, and you can go ahead and stop sharing, and we'll go back to the video here.
Oh, one thing I wanted to point out, we were talking about the parallels between Flow Designer and ATF. One of the key differences that jumps to mind is when you test in Flow, for example, if you're setting field values and saving your record, those are saved and left there. So don't test your flows in production, obviously. When you test ATF, those changes, if you're setting a record or setting values, those are backed out at the end of the test. So one leaves a clean slate, one does not.
And well, as we also recommend to not run ATF in production, so right, that's one of our best practices. As depending on what you're testing, if you're testing a priority one incident, that might ring some alarm bells on your production instance that you probably don't want to. So
yeah, even if you're rolling something back, that notification can get generated before the rollback happens. So yeah, don't do your tests in production.
Be careful.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted. What was the question?
Oh, so the question is, it looks like it's basically, can you test the login page? So logging in with a URL step, hitting username and password and hitting submit. I don't think this is possible, but maybe it is.
I'm thinking hard on that, but I would agree that it's not possible because ATF, the login page would be a client-side test, so it relies on the client scheduled runner. And that one needs an active session. So it's basically post login, right? So yeah, I would agree testing the login page is not possible.
I'd be curious to know the use case, because typically, and it may not even be, the people may be coming in from SSO, or they may not be hitting the login page. So yeah, let us know what your use case is on that, or what a scenario would be where you want to test the login page.
What we do recommend in that context is that you start your test with creating a user, giving them appropriate permissions and roles, and impersonating that user, so you're testing the proper authorization. Not necessarily the login, but at least you test within given privilege.
The original recommendation was to impersonate a user, but again, it could, if I'm impersonating Daniel and then suddenly Daniel's account gets disabled or a role gets taken away and suddenly my tests fail because I was relying on Daniel's account, that's not good. And you can say, well, I'll make an ATF user account. Well, someone's going to mess with that, right? The only surefire way to know that your test has the right user with the right roles, et cetera, is to create it. Set that up as your first step when you want to run a test as somebody else.
That's not actually only true for users. It pretty much is for all the data you need as you go through your test, right? We tend to say keep your test self-contained. Everything you need as part of the test, you should stage as you
good point.
Run your test and have the rollback clear up the mess that you created, right?
Yeah, and one of the things I think when you're when you're doing these self-contained tests like the one we did today, you probably could have written a test that maybe opens a form, adds some values, hits a button, and that triggers the flow. But then you end up having this really long test, and if it has a client-side step somewhere, then your whole test now needs a client step runner. So when you make them real small like this, then you can do a whole lot of stuff server side, which is going to make it run faster, and you don't need as many client test runners running. We have any other questions coming in here? So we have, instead of creating a new user, I think that's a follow-up to the login. So yep. I think we're recommending that you create a new user and then impersonate the user to start your tests.
Yeah, we do.
All right. Well,
any announcements, Mr. Brad?
I was going to ask you that just now.
All right, we have Tech Now from last week. On the 29th of June was Charn Lin. We talked about automating your deployment process. I mentioned that earlier in the show. He went through some of the CI/CD and the APIs and how you can automate that. We've got that posted in the community on YouTube, on the developer blog, so you shouldn't have any problem finding that. If you do, devlink.sn/technow. We've also got a coming episode of Breakpoint podcast tomorrow, the 7th of July. It will be with Rajiv Sethi about starting a citizen developer program. So we had a wonderful discussion about that. If you've got people in your organization that are flooding you with requests, hey, can we build this? Can we do that? And your IT department just doesn't have the bandwidth to handle some of these non-strategic applications that are obviously adding value or would add value, take a listen. That's devlink.sn/break-point. I can't remember all these dev links that I'm getting. Just the one to go to is devlink.sn/links. That will give you our directory of all these other short links. So we put that out a week or so ago. People are eating that up. It's a wonderful resource. We've got another Tech Now coming out at the end of the month. about the Rome release. Early access is coming July 22nd, so mark your calendars. You'll be able to test this out on your personal developer instances. You will obviously either need to release and reclaim a new one with that release, or you can upgrade and test that upgrade process as well. So Rome is coming. We are leading you to Rome. And we've got podcasts, we've got more of these videos. Next week's Creator Toolbox, if you haven't already set your calendar for 8 a.m. Pacific on Tuesdays, it's going to be a Creator Toolbox or a Tech Now. Next Tuesday, I'll be covering dynamic inputs to flows. Very configurable and very flexible stuff for you to work with. I think that's the right session next week. I'm trying to.
I think that's
or was
right.
was I on the 22nd? No, you're on the 22nd. We'll get it figured out.
We'll publish it. We'll be doing something on Tuesday.
Tuesdays, 8 a.m. Pacific is when you want to set your alarm. Block that time off for learning and education or growth and whatever your organization calls it. When you got that time allocated, this is your time. So love to see you here live, or you can watch online again as you see fit. I think that's pretty much the major ones of what content we've got coming up. Did I miss anything?
I can put another $5 in the swear jar getting the Platform Academy out on Thursday.
Oh, yeah. We did have 2 more questions come in that I think we can address. The first one is, why are the ATF tests and suites properties turned off by default in subprods? I think that's basically your subprod's a copy of your prod instance, and it definitely needs to be off in prod. So this is one of those things where, that's a thing that you opt into. So you say, yeah, I'm going to turn it on, and then you run your test. And so the next question is a future-looking question. Do we think there might be any collaboration integrations with other testing technologies like Selenium in the future? I don't know the answer to that one. Anybody?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'd be wondering in the use case in terms of why we integrated that, right? We don't replace them, right? There's a use case why you would use a Selenium if you want to have like an end-to-end test case that spans different applications, right? You start something in ServiceNow and want to make sure it's happening on Salesforce, Workday, whatever, right? So that's where the Selenium piece is brilliant, as you can get to different applications. But integrating that in ATF, I'd be interested in the use case when you would need it. Where you can use it is probably what you've seen with Charn's session last week, where you're automating your deployments, where you integrate and run automated tests. You can trigger an ATF test, you can trigger a Selenium test, and have that as part of your pipeline, absolutely.
All right. And then the last one was mobile capabilities for ATF.
We spoke about higher priorities than the user interface, right? Mobile is on that list. Absolutely. Mobile, as well as like the new user interfaces, the Now Experience framework that we have, agent workspaces. We know these are currently not really testable in ATF, and they are on the high priority list.
All right. We had one more just come in. This will be the last one, and then we'll cut it off. But retain data created in test suites. I remember getting this question a lot too. Can we retain data? So what do you think?
So at this moment in time, you cannot, right? There's always the rollback at the end of the execution of a test. But what we also have on our backlog is kind of thinking about how can we make this data at least live for more than one test, right? So you have a test suite, there are multiple tests inside, you want to carry on outputs from the first test into the next one. How can we make that available? So that's something we think about. No promise yet on when and how it'll look like, but that is something we think about.
Nice. And I think the other part of that is when I've heard people ask that before, it's, they want to, if the test failed, they want to be able to go look at the data and understand the problem.
There's something good coming. We have a debugger, an ATF debugger, which is also up on the list, which should be there shortly. That will allow you to pause and stop an ATF run and actually look at your data, what's happening in the back. You can even interact with the form and fix the data to see if that actually makes your tests succeed. So that is definitely also something we have in the roadmap, yeah.
Boy, awesome. We got to get Daniel back on the show for some of this good information, Brad.
Yeah.
That's a good
what other products do you work with?
All right. Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the show and walking us through creating these custom test steps. I know I learned a good deal. I don't think I had done that before. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back on Thursday afternoon US time for Live Coding Happy Hour. And again, we're going to be doing this every Tuesday morning, or something at this time every Tuesday morning. So.
Thanks for having me.
Well, yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.